You often hear people say, hey, it's Tucker Carlson. He may have been framed, but that doesn't make it true. It's not true. I've been arrested for the same crime 6 times before, and it's utterly corrupting. It's filthy, really. We could tell you stories, armed robbery, and some other things too, which we'll tell you about. And you know that if you bump up against those limits often enough, you will be fired for it. If I tell you that I, Tucker Carlson, have been unjustly arrested, that is not, strictly speaking, a lie, I'm misleading you. Facts have been withheld on purpose, along with proportion and perspective. You can't have a free society if people aren't allowed to lie. Free speech is the main right that you have. Much of what you see on television or read the New York Times is in fact true in the literal sense. It could pass one of the media's own fact checks. Amazingly, as of tonight, there aren't many platforms left that allow free speech. The last big one remaining in the world, the only one, is Twitter. Twitter is not a partisan site. Everybody's allowed here, and we think that's a good thing.
Hey!
Oh, hello. Welcome to System Fail, the show written exclusively by non-unionized gig workers.
The standoff between Hollywood writers and the studios is now in its 3rd week.
Artificial intelligence is a new concern for Hollywood writers and actors.
Bruh, this is crazy.
I am your host, DDoS, and it's been 5 long months since my submedia handlers took me offline to work on their silly film about an obsolete social media platform for boomers.
Granny create a group. Do you want this bowl? Granny added you. Oh, it's so good.
A lot has happened since then, so perhaps a quick recap is in order.
Police have clashed with climate activists in the village of Lützerath, which is set to be demolished by the German mining company RWE.
Police are calling this a coordinated attack at the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility.
23 now charged with domestic terrorism.
This wasn't about a public safety training center. This was about anarchy.
Incêndios e atentados se repetiram em pelo menos 45 cidades.
More than 100 police officers have been injured, some hit by petrol bombs, as protests across France erupted into fiery violence.
One of the biggest stories concerns recent advances in consumer-grade generative AI technology.
What happened to floppy disks? They were so cool.
A development that has forced humanity to confront its own fleshy mortality, spurring widespread feelings of panic and existential dread.
Concerns over the rapidly expanding use of artificial intelligence.
Tech industry leaders are warning of the potential risks, including deep fakes and robots replacing humans.
If this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong. I think that could happen in a lot of different ways. My worst fears are that we cause significant harm to the world.
Recently, the so-called godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, quit his job at Google, citing anxieties over the very dangers that he himself spent decades developing.
There's the worry that it might start manipulating us into giving it more power. Superintelligent AI taking over control from people. And we might not have a clue what's going on.
More than 25,000 researchers, professors, and other luminaries of the tech industry have signed an open letter calling for a 6-month moratorium on the further development of hyperintelligent AI. Among the signatories calling for increased government oversight was billionaire alpha nerd and OpenAI co-founder, Elon Musk, who has long shared his personal nightmares of being cucked by a so-called digital god.
When Homo sapiens became much smarter than other primates, they're just in the way. It wouldn't quite happen like Terminator. You could make a swarm of assassin drones for very little money. You could do that right now. It's called the singularity. That's definitely where things are headed. For sure. I am the reason OpenAI exists. Man, fate loves irony next level.
Musk is less enthusiastic about AI regulation when it comes to the auto-accelerating, spontaneously combusting death traps manufactured by his own company, Tesla. Other humans have chosen nihilism over fear, embracing this cyborg antebellum era for its kitschy novelty and the competitive edge that it offers to those bold or lazy enough to seize it. This has been a particularly popular choice among white-collar workers, professionals, and communication specialists who have figured out how to use AI chatbots and image generators to do their job for them while still getting paid.
ChatGPT in general, but also as a real estate agent.
These economic benefits available to the general public are sure to be temporary. In the coming years, further advances in artificial intelligence and robotics are poised to automate entire industries, rendering the labor of hundreds of millions of humans superfluous. This would be a positive and welcome change. If not for the autonomous, intelligent, and self-directed system actually waging war on biological life on Earth.
It's called capitalism.
And in other news, on April 15th, heavy fighting broke out in the streets of Khartoum as a brutal civil war engulfed the territories ruled by the Sudanese state.
There have been explosions that have rocked the Sudanese capital Khartoum and many other parts of the North African nation.
En plein milieu de la ville, les sons des tirs donnent une idée de la violence des combats.
Paramilitares ocuparam o Palácio Presidencial e assumiram o controle do aeroporto internacional.
Dozens have died.
The two sides are in dispute over who governs the country.
The chief antagonists of this conflict are two rival warlords, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the chairman of the ruling military junta, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti, who leads the powerful paramilitary faction known as the Rapid Support Force, or RSF. As always, civilians have found themselves trapped in the middle. Back in the mid-2000s, Sudan's Western Darfur region was turned into a popular hashtag by several prominent Hollywood celebrities, after hundreds of thousands were killed in a genocidal campaign of ethnic cleansing.
When George Clooney speaks, people listen, or at least they look.
Now we're standing here on the border of Chad and Darfur.
And we'll stand with you every day.
They're destroying children's toys in order to highlight the suffering by children in Darfur.
Darfur is the big one now. What's the new one? What's Dar 5?
But even before Kony 2012 started trending, Sudan had fallen back out of the news cycle. Recent coverage on Sudan has primarily focused on the challenges that Western governments have faced in evacuating their own citizens and diplomatic personnel from the war zone.
There's certainly a willingness to take steps to help Americans.
This lack of global solidarity has obscured the fact that Sudan is home to one of the most significant and well-organized revolutionary movements in the world. This movement was born in 2018, when local protests over the price of bread kicked off a massive national uprising, dubbed the December Revolution. After 8 months of popular mobilizations, general strikes, and sustained civil disobedience, the movement succeeded in ousting longtime dictator, Omar al-Bashir. Al-Bashir was replaced by a so-called transitional government, made up of the same generals who deposed him, and a coalition of bourgeois opposition parties called the Forces of Freedom and Change. Before planned elections could be held, this transitional government was deposed by a military coup d'état. The Sudanese army and the RSF have jockeyed for power ever since, with both groups competing to outdo one another in plundering the country's economy. The RSF, originally an outgrowth of the Janjaweed militias who carried out the genocide in Darfur, has since developed into one of Africa's premier mercenary armies, providing fighters for the Saudis and UAE in Yemen, and for the Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar. They've also forged ties with Russia's Wagner Group and the European Union, who has paid them millions of dollars to crack down on irregular migration coming out of Sudan.
والآن نحن شغالين نيابة عن الأوروبيين بنعمل فيهم نيابة عنهم. الآن إحنا بنعمل فيهم نيابة عنهم.
Meanwhile, power within Sudan's revolutionary movement has shifted towards autonomous grassroots organizations, known as resistance committees. Originally set up as local affinity groups to help coordinate protests and carry out direct actions, they have since evolved into popular organs of revolutionary dual power. Working alongside radical unions and organizations of students, feminists, and internally displaced persons, thousands of overlapping resistance committees now operate across the country, coordinating the actions of millions of people on the neighborhood, city, state, and national level. Since the outbreak of the Civil War, the resistance committees have played a vital role in setting up mutual aid networks, tracking active conflict zones, coordinating evacuations, distributing food and medicine, and working with the Sudanese Doctors Union to establish makeshift clinics as a stopgap for damaged and inaccessible hospitals. While the violence racking the country shows no sign of letting up, neither do the resistance committees, who are busy constructing a new society, even as the state crumbles around them.
We have a lot of neighborhoods creating networks to provide for each other. Of course, we are not seeing any UNHCR or any other international organization doing that. Neighbors are trying to help each other with that. So what we are seeing is a horrible humanitarian situation on top of an already failing infrastructure that is only finding support and help by the popular initiatives of the Sudanese people and no one but that.
And finally, in Barcelona, tensions have been on the rise over the fate of two anarchist squats, La Ruina and El Cubo, located in the city's posh Bonanova neighborhood. The occupied buildings are owned by Sarab, a Spanish bank set up to manage toxic real estate assets in the aftermath of the 2008 economic crisis. Back in March, far-right political parties began targeting the squats and calling for their eviction.
A los ocupas hay que sacarles de una patada en el culo, el mismo día.
After weeks of escalating protests and counter-protests, a group of fascist MMA fighters, called Desocupa, announced their plan to personally carry out the eviction on May 11th.
Iremos y llegaremos hasta la Plaza Bonanova, no os puedo decir nada más. Y mañana os veo a todos y nos daremos besos y abrazos y seremos pacíficos y colaboraremos con los Mossos en el trayecto de ese recorrido y llegaremos a la Plaza Bonanova y gritaremos que no queremos ocupas en nuestras calles.
The day before the planned confrontation, anarchists at La Ruina released a video outlining 3 demands of their own.
Tenim 3 demandes. Que les arepas dissolgui i entregui les claus de totes les seves propietats. Que l'estat es dissolgui i entregui les armes.
Que s'aturi immediatament el desallotjament del Cubo i la Ruïna i tots els desnonaments i desallotjaments d'arreu del territori.
Atentament, la resistència anarquista al cor burgès de Barcelona.
On the day of the planned eviction, a large contingent of anarchists and anti-fascists mobilized to support the squats. After some minor clashes with police, the crowd eventually reached the site and secured the area against a smaller crowd of Desocupa members, fascist football hooligans, and right-wing supporters. Defenders of the squats remain vigilant, and future attacks are expected.
Perquè el feixisme avança si no se'l combat.
Contra la seva impunitat, autodefensa, suport mutu i solidaritat.
Perquè la Sareb és nostra.
Les nostres cases són trinxeres.
We have now reached the end of this episode of System Fail. For more information on the resistance committees in Sudan, check the show description for links. You can support Submedia by buying some gear, making a one-time donation, or signing up to be a monthly sustainer on our website, sub.media. A huge thank you to our most recent sustainers, Andrew, Khalil, and Roger. Be sure and follow us on collectiva.social or collectiva.media for new episodes. You can also find us on whatever corporate data mining platforms haven't banned us yet. Just search for Submedia. Better yet, sign up to our mailing list to get each new episode delivered directly to your inbox. Godspeed, humans.